Major League Baseball went through a difficult era during the mid-90s to the early 2000s when players began getting tested for steroid use. Although steroids caused and are still causing a lot of damage to the game of baseball, the usage generated equally as much good for the league. The best baseball in the history of the game, at least from an offensive standpoint, was played during the early 2000s. You might as well call the steroid era the second golden age of baseball. In 2001, Barry Bonds, the face of steroids in baseball, exploded for an unachievable record-breaking 73 home runs. In '96, the MLB saw 17 players break the 40 home run mark. This past year, one player was able to accomplish this feat, Nelson Cruz. Also, the MLB saw its greatest slugging percentage in league history at 428% in 2004. Slugging percentage is the most common way to measure the power of a hitter. 7 out of the top 20 best single-season slugging percentages have come from players who have been suspected of using steroids. When you look closer, you see that Babe Ruth accounted for another 7 of those 20 seasons. Then you realize that juicers make up over half of the remaining seasons. The stats go on and on to prove that offensive numbers were greater during this era, as is expected. All it takes is going to MLB.com and comparing the season from 10 to 20 years ago to one of the past few years. The leaders in place realized the increase in offense, but they chose to turn a blind eye to the facts. They kept their loose rules in place for years before strengthening them. It doesn't take much to understand why. Many people believe that juices had a negative effect on the game because they've tainted the record books. Plenty of steroid users are sitting at or near the top of baseball records. Most people don't consider these records to be legit though, so it's like they don't even exist. Notable players like Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, Barry Bonds, and Roger Clemens all had stellar careers. But they are all struggling to make the Hall of Fame. Last year, none of them received even half of the 429 votes needed to be inducted. Pitchers are also a concern among Hall of Fame inductees. Unsurprisingly, pitchers had a higher earned run average, or ERA, during the steroid era. ERA is used to determine the amount of runs a pitcher gives up while they are on the mound. Of course, pitchers that pitch when ridiculous hitting numbers were taking place will have given up more runs. However, Hall of Fame voters and baseball fans alike will consider this when they think of great pitchers. Rational people won't think Clayton Kershaw was miles better last year than Randy Johnson was in 2001 because Kershaw had a 1.77 ERA while Johnson had a 2.49. Rational people, however, will realize that both pitchers had the lowest ERAs in their respective seasons. Both are great dominant pitchers, and they pitched during different eras, so you can't judge them the same. Producing some of the best offensive seasons in league history doesn't come without its benefits to the game. During this era, interest in baseball sparked worldwide. It's hard not to pay attention to the sport when players are hitting 20 more home runs and 30 more RBIs than they normally would in a season. The increased interest can be tracked through attendance rates. In 1996, attendance in ballparks jumped nearly 20%. From that year, attendance increased or stayed relatively the same until 2008 when it regressed for 3 straight seasons. It's simple. People want to see exciting baseball, and the steroid era produced the most exciting baseball ever. The Mitchell Report, the first report listing players involved with performance-enhancing drugs, was released in 2007. It might have had a small impact on attendance rates, but it wouldn't have had a major one. Fans knew that players were juicing, yet they still attended the games. The real reason that attendance rates decreased was because the Mitchell Report inspired fear into the players. They were afraid to use PEDs because of the media backlash that came with them. Consequently, cleaner baseball meant less impressive numbers, which meant decreased interest among the fan base. A portion of people would argue that these idols getting caught shattered the kids' views that looked up to them. In a way, they are right. The bust would have mainly affected younger children, though. I'm sure a kid that idolized Mark McGwire would have been devastated when they found he'd been caught for juicing. Eventually, as the child matured, they would understand why their favorite player had got punished and come to the realization that juicers should be punished. This is how older kids would have viewed the issue following the immediate shock factor that they would have. Kids growing up seeing players get caught using PEDs will help PED use in the future, as the next generation will be wary of the repercussions that go hand in hand with usage. People paying more attention to this baseball helped just a little financially too. MLB's revenue increased significantly during the steroid age. This is most likely because since more people attended games and tuned in via television, the league was able to attract more advertisers and charge more for advertisements placed around ballparks and for ads run during games on TV. From 1995 to 2000, the annual revenue for the MLB nearly doubled. And since 2000, revenue has doubled again. Today, the MLB rakes in more than $8 billion in income every year. Behind the scenes, the commissioner has to associate a great deal of this rapid increase in revenue with illegal usage. The MLB would be considerably different right now if steroids had never infiltrated locker rooms. There would have been no possible way for players to put up the sort of stats they were able to. Interest still would have grown, but at much slower rates. Same with revenue. The subsequent year that illegal substances started receiving harsher penalties resulted in pitchers' ERAs league-wide dropping dramatically. Also, compared to the year before, hitting in all areas decreased. As I mentioned earlier, attendance rates for games dropped greatly right after the names started surfacing from the Mitchell report, by about 5 million less tickets sold per year. The MLB still hasn't seen a full recovery from this. It is hard for the league to garner the full attention of casual baseball fans. Once they figure out how to do this, the MLB will see interest return to how it was a decade or two ago. All in all, PEDs and steroids cause just as much, if not more good for the league as the problems that they caused. And there is no doubt that the commissioner is secretly smiling behind the frown he puts on for the media.